On July 27th, 2016, my heart stopped. I was 10,000 kilometers away from home when this happened, and my friend Jason immediately began CPR while simultaneously screaming at my other friend to call the front desk and ask for the AED. 30 minutes, 23 floors down, and 2 resuscitations later, our ambulance began to weave into and out of Chongqing's traffic. This evening marked the premature end of my trade mission in China. So last summer, I was handpicked to represent Canadian businesses in China along with other youth ambassadors. And for those of you who know me, you probably know that my career aspirations involve business. And that's why as soon as I was offered a membership with Junior Team Canada, I immediately said yes. Little did I know that a trade mission would mean waking up in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, ECG machine, BP cuff, and nasal cannula. I woke up to the sight of needle markings on my arms and electrode pads all over my chest. And on top of that, I couldn't even understand what the doctors were saying. I didn't know what was being put into my body, and I couldn't just tell the nurse, "Excuse me, nurse, could you please take these off because I really need to go to the bathroom." The language barrier was very daunting. And in fact, at one point, one of the nurses pulled out her phone, started typing something in, and just showed me the screen. Google Translate. I had never felt so helpless and so lost in my life. So soon after, I was sent home in tears to seek further medical attention. And the weeks that followed were a blur of doctor's appointments, lab results, a few more trips to the ER, and yes, more doctor's appointments. But what consumed me was not the fact that I was virtually... Is that better? Thanks for helping me with my mic. So anyway, the weeks that followed that were just a blur of doctor's appointments, lab results, a few more trips to the ER, and yes, more doctor's appointments. But what really got to me was not the fact that I was virtually living in these doctor's clinics, but rather the sense of failure that kept me up day in, day out. And I found myself slipping further and further into depression, and before I knew it, my doctor's appointments were coupled with just as frequent psychotherapy sessions. And while Daphne was really, really nice, she gave me 2 lollipops at the end of each session instead of just 1. My saving grace actually came from elsewhere, and it came from these 4 lessons which I will share with you today. Lesson number 1. The power of impermanence. So nothing helps us understand the fleeting beauty of life more than death itself. Has anyone here traveled before? Awesome. So when you're traveling, you're taking in every single moment. And that's because you know that your time in that place is so limited. You try to savor every bite, every photograph, and every sight, scent, sound. And every friendship you make and every conversation you have is just a little sweeter than the friendships and conversations you have back home. And that's because you know it's temporary. Prior to my near-death experience, I didn't have a sense that my time was limited, nor did I understand that life was a gift with a time limit. So this brings us to lesson number 2, the power of now. Because impermanence begets presence. And To me, being present means understanding that today is all we're ever going to get. Because yesterday was once a today, and tomorrow is just going to be another today. And before you know it, you've allowed days, weeks, months, years to just slip by. When I catch myself getting lost in the mechanics of my daily routine, I just try to take a step back, away from all of the noise, and spend time with the people I love. Because that is what makes me feel alive and present. See, the paradox of death is that it actually points you towards what it really feels like to be alive. And living has to do with connection and experience in full expression. So I want to ask you today, what makes you feel alive and present? And who makes you feel alive and present? Lesson number 3, the power of transformation. So I'd like to share with you a quote from Cynthia Ocelli, and it goes like this. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. So, according to this quote, your struggle holds the seeds of transformation. And I completely agree. As I've experienced multiple episodes of struggle and loss, I've noticed a pattern, and it's that I become more resilient, and the seeds of my struggle have always resulted in growth. See, I've learned that life is a continuous cycle of struggle, transformation, and growth. And although it may not always seem obvious, if you look at growth, you can always trace it back to the struggle that preceded it. So, what does growth actually look like? That brings us to our final and most important lesson. Lesson number 4, the power of why. Have you ever stepped outside of yourself to connect with something bigger than you? Daphne actually advised me to start journaling, but I really dislike writing, so I started talking to people instead. And through that, I began to understand what kind of impact I wanted to have on the world and why I even existed. In other words, I began searching for my why. So after realizing my passion for modern education and the classroom of tomorrow, I actually co-founded a national nonprofit which continues to grow today, and I'm really proud of that. You see, the beauty of pursuing a purpose and following your calling is that you are guided internally, and yet you're also connected to something beyond you. And this is the experience that I think most of us strive towards, because when you know your why, you have a sense of purpose that can guide the way you interact with the world. So, what have I gathered from all of these lessons? I've gathered that death is powerfully enlightening, but you don't have to wait for someone you love or for yourself to get close to it to start changing the way you think and live. In fact, if there's one thing that I would like for all of you here to try, it is this. Find your why. I know some of you may be thinking, oh, that's just a mission statement, right? Not necessarily. If you look at a company or an organization's mission statement, it will usually only include the what and the how, but rarely does it include the why. And that's because it's not easy to pinpoint. But your why matters because that is where it all begins. When you know your why and you chase it, everything else falls into place. With your why, you have a purpose. And that purpose gives you a sense of urgency, which ties into the time limit I mentioned earlier. And when you have a sense of urgency, you get things done. Not just busy work, but the things that actually matter to you. The things that are relevant to your why. This is where growth comes in. When you work from the inside out, and when everything in here is reflected and expressed in the things you do. And this is what I call being why-driven. And this is what I think it means to be truly alive. Thank you.